warm welcome to this webinar. My name is Markus Steigenberger. I'm the Managing Director of Agora Think Tanks, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this 1.5 hours now on the Chinese energy transition, the state of play, and the climate state report. Now, what we are going to do in the next this session is we're basically going to present a report that has been produced by our colleagues from Agora Energy China, a report on the state of play of the Chinese energy transition. It's actually the first kind of this report. And I'm very much looking forward to, first of all, listening to a number of colleagues presenting the results of this report. And then afterwards, we're going to have a few guests. I will introduce them at a later stage, who will engage in a panel discussion on going a bit deeper into the results and the findings of this report. Now, for me, as a non-Chinese person, I have to admit that the Chinese energy transition is still a bit of a mystery. On the one hand, I'm observing that China is kind of the biggest player in every kind. It's the biggest consumer of energy. It is the biggest producer of coal. It's still producing or building almost 100 gigawatt of new coal plants. And on the other hand, we see that China is leading the race for renewables, for wind and solar, but also for electric vehicles, for batteries, clean manufacturing, etc., etc. So there's two sides of the coin, and what I can promise for the event for the next 1.5 hours, that we will look into this in quite some detail. We will hear a lot of numbers. Many of those numbers you will know, many you will find insightful, others you might find surprising. We will hear a lot of background information. You might not get answers on all your questions, but I can promise that you will get answers on many, maybe most of your questions. And obviously, you have the chance to ask your questions. So don't forget to write your questions in the chat. We will see how many of them we can answer during the discussion phase. Now, as I said, we start with presenting the results of the report, and I'm very glad and very much looking forward to hand over to my dear colleague, Dr. Kevin Tu, who will introduce the first chapter of this report. Kevin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Markus, for your opening remarks and the kind introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon or good evening, whenever you are joining from. It's a pleasure to return to Berlin this week to present the first edition of Agora's Energy Transition and Climate Status Report for China. Before we begin, a very important statement from our team. As a professional energy transition research institute, Agora Energy China relies exclusively on publicly available data. No confidential information is included in any of our reports. Today's presentation will be delivered by myself and 3 of my colleagues. I will first give an overarching overview of our key findings, followed by my colleagues on China's carbon emissions trajectory, power system transformation, as well as industry decarbonization. Let me highlight 4 key research findings from this year's report. First, China's emissions have shown early signs of plateauing, marking a major climate milestone. China's carbon dioxide emissions fell 1.2 year-on-year in the first quarter of this year. This is the first job driven by the energy mix improvement, backed by President Xi Jinping's recent pledge of a 2035 climate commitment to cover all economic sectors as well as greenhouse gas emissions. This could bring an earlier emission peak and also accelerate progress towards the 2060 carbon neutrality goals. Second, renewables are reshaping China's power system at record speed. China added an astonishing 358 gigawatts of wind and solar power in 2024, meeting its 2030 renewable target 6 years ahead of schedule. Continued efforts could be made by the Chinese decision makers on this front. This could help China to move its clean energy transition agenda forward. Third, industry decarbonization is accelerating, led by electrification. Industry emissions are falling as clean tech scales. A 3.5% drop in energy intensity in 2024 could be translated into 160 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. Still, coal chemical capacity expansion and a weak carbon pricing signal threaten progress. Continued momentum depending on stronger electrification and pricing tools. Last but not least, a just coal transition is imperative amid continued new coal expansion. Despite impressive renewable gains, China approved 94.5 gigawatts of new coal capacity in 2024, the most since 2015. To avoid carbon lock-in, new permits must stop and existing plants optimized. A just transition is vitally important for China's coal regions to meet climate goals. Now, let me address a frequent question we often receive. Have China's carbon emissions already peaked? These issues need to be interpreted from several angles. First, this requires focusing on long-term trend, not short-term fluctuation. From an average 9.6% annual growth in the 2010s, China's emission growth has already slowed down significantly to just 0.7% last year, followed by a 1.2% of emissions contraction in the first quarter this year. Looking ahead, sustained emissions growth is unlikely because the record deployment of renewables, electrical vehicles, and other clean technologies, combined with economic headwinds and trade friction, is structurally weakening fossil fuel demand in China. While energy concerns persist, data quality issues or short-term policy shift may cause some short-term fluctuation, but not for the longer-term trend. One of this year's key recommendations is a paradigm shift in China's energy and climate policy making. In today's world of disruption and uncertainties, the traditional 3E model, energy, environmental, and economy, is no longer sufficient for China. We propose adopting the sector framework, including security of the energy system, economic development, climate change, technology readiness, other pricing challenges, and regulatory burden. For further detail, I invite you to download and read our report after this webinar. Understanding China's energy transition requires context. While China is the largest energy consumer and emitter globally, many of its per capita indicators, such as per capita income, still lag far behind a typical developed country. This is why I categorize China as the first ever hybrid superpower in the modern era, combining features of both developed and developing economies. This dual identity helps explain the logic behind China's dual carbon goal. Most of today's Chinese decision makers came of age when China was still a developing country. Their mindset reflects a cautious approach. They saw a 10-year buffer as necessary before peaking emissions. In contrast, the next generation of leaders, shaped by a more confident and globally engaged China, is expected to adopt more OECD-oriented climate and environment ambitions after 2030. Because of this unique development status, China is well positioned to bridge the widening divide between the global North and the global South on climate and energy issues. Thank you very much for your attention. Now, without further ado, I'd like to hand the floor to my colleague Yang Zhou, who will take us through China's carbon emissions in more detail. So the stage is yours.
Thank you, Kevin, for your wonderful introduction of the first chapter. So next, I'd like to walk you through the recent trends of China's carbon emissions. So let's start with the big picture. To understand the present, we need to look back. So China's carbon emissions declined in 2015. So this is the only negative growth in the past 2 decades. And since the decline, China's carbon emissions rebounded, but the growth rate is slowing down, despite some drastic fluctuations induced by the pandemic. And in 2024, China's carbon emissions grow by 0.7%, which has been the slowest growth since the post-16 rebound and a 3.8 decline from the previous year. And if we break down into the fuel type, if you look at the right figure, we can see a clear pattern that the coal emissions is dominating the whole emissions, the shape, and also the trend. The brown line is the coal, and the pink one is the overall emissions. And another interesting insight here, if you look at the stack area graphic on the left, the grayish blue area, which stands for the natural gas emissions, is quite small. It's even smaller than the process emissions. But on the right figure, you can see the growth rate of natural gas of most of the time. It's the highest compared to the other lines. And one important fact you cannot ignore is that China is the 3rd largest natural gas consumer in the world, following the US and Russia. So that brings us to the next slide. On the left figure, you can see more clearly how oil and gas role in China's energy-related emissions are expanding over the past years. Since the 2010, oil and gas shares grow by 3 and 5 percentage points respectively. Nevertheless, coal is still the king. In 2024, China's coal related emissions account for 73%. That's 8 points down from the 2010 levels. And if we look into the correlated emissions, the largest emitter is the power sector. And power sector is also the only major sector that grew constantly through and after the pandemic. So besides the power generation sectors, coal consumption also surged in chemicals, metals, and paper industries in 2024. So here's the puzzle. Carbon intensity. So carbon intensity is the carbon emissions per unit of GDP. China has been doing pretty well on reducing its carbon intensity. You can see the pink line on the left figure. It's dropping steadily. However, China is still standing somewhere near double of the world average. And the blue line is the world average. Why? Because China's energy consumption is closely tied to its economic growth. In the figure in the middle, I know it's a little bit complicated for you, but don't worry, I'll explain. This is energy and electricity consumption elasticity. If it is below zero, it means that the country's energy consumption declines while the economy is growing. Unfortunately, China's energy and electricity consumption elasticity is all above zero. And what's interesting here, if you look at the pink line, China's electricity is growing faster than energy consumption and GDP, which means that China's economy is electrifying, which could be a positive sign if the electricity is cleaner. Then let's take a look into the monthly change of the fuel combustion carbon emissions. So you can see clearly over the past few years during the pandemic, we experienced some drastic fluctuations, ups and downs. But since the early 2024, the trend leveled off and the changes became more mild and more notable in the first quarter of 25. We witnessed a decline of 1.2% in carbon emissions, which was the first time since the COVID. We would consider this more of a structural change instead of a data blip. Here we can see more clearly on the drivers. The largest driver, power generation, the thermal power in the first quarter dropped by 4.7%. However, the total power demand in China in the first quarter rose by 2.5%. Why the disconnect? Because the clean energy generation filled the gap. Solar generation in the first quarter surged by nearly 20%. And also we saw strong growth in wind, hydro, and nuclear. So this means that China's massive build out of this renewable energy is starting to bend China's carbon emission curve. So where does this leave us? We will see that the very mild growth of the carbon emissions in last year and the negative growth of carbon emissions in the first quarter give us an early sign of plateauing China's carbon emissions. So this is my chapter. And now I hand over to Michael to give you a closer look into the power sector. Thank you.
Thank you. As to China's power sector, there are four figures worth mentioning. This first one is that China's global wind power capacity accounted for 46% of the world, and nearly 50% of the global solar capacity came from China. And the aggregate wind and solar capacity in 2024, and China
China's aggregate wind and solar capacity reached over 1,400 gigawatts. It's accounting for 42% of the country's total power capacity. But in 2024, the electricity from coal-fired generation accounted for 55%. It's also very, very large. And last year, China's power demand increased 6.8%. And as to China's renewable development, we have to see that since 2010 to 2024, China's renewable grew very rapidly. It's almost consistently outpaced global rates by 7 to 18 percentage points. And China's power consumption since 2010 to 2024 entered a rapid growth period. For example, for the period of 2010 to 2024, the average annual growth rate was 6.3% for China's electricity demand. For the period from 2010 to 2015, the growth rate was 5.8%. About the growth rate for the periods of 2016 to 2020 and 2021 to 2024 were 6.8% and 7%. So we can see that the electricity demand entered accelerated growth period. Most the drivers come from the electrification and the digitalization of the economy. Also, some industry shifts are very important. As in terms of the greening power system, China has two very unbalanced trends in this aspect. In terms of installed capacity, the coal share fell from 67% in 2010 to 36% in 2024, while the share of wind and solar rose from 3% to 42%. In terms of electricity generation, the share of a coal-fired generator fell from 77% to 55% in the same period. And the wind and solar grew from just 1% to over 18%. So this highlights a very important phenomenon, the unbalanced development for wind and solar in terms of installed capacity and electricity output. Why is the impact on generation still limited? As to the power sector outlook by 2030, we have to see that China's demand in terms of energy and electricity will grow in the years to come. China's energy and electricity demand will continue to grow steadily, with power demand outpacing overall energy use from 2025 to 2030. Electricity consumption is projected to rise by 500 to 700 terawatts annually, reaching 17,000 to 14,000 terawatt hours by 2030. But China is also facing a very pressing or daunting challenge in great integration of renewables. China's clean energy shift is accelerating, but the great integration problem has become very serious. Greater system flexibility, stronger source load coordination, and expanded distribution networks are all vital for accommodating these variable renewables. Another trend is about industrial electrification. Industry consumes almost 2/3 of China's energy, and China's electricity. So electrifying China's industrial sector is crucial to greening the power system. Shifting manufacturing from fossil fuels to clean electricity is a core foundation for China's transition. In summary, the realization of China's two dual carbon goals means transition, China's energy system transition from high energy intensive to electricity intensive system. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Isadora Wang. I am leading the industry decarbonization policy research and advocacy in Beijing. With the next 4 slides, I would love to give you an introduction and briefing on China's industry decarbonization and development of the renewable hydrogen sector. So as Michael has just mentioned, industry sector is China's biggest consumer of primary energy and electricity. And this makes it crucial for China to realize China's dual carbon goals, which is set by the government to peak carbon emissions by 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2060. It comes with several different aspects. First, if you look at the left diagram, industry sector is the biggest absolute dominant role in China's primary energy consumption throughout the years. This means there are huge potential to electrify industry processes and heating and energy uses in the future. And we are working on this actually. If you see the chart in the middle, industry sector is also the biggest sector for electricity consumption in China. This is slightly different from the situation in Europe, where residential and commercial electricity use contributes to about half of the general of the total. In China, electricity used by the industry sector is actually also the dominant one, which means like if the industry players are willing to purchase green electricity, this will help boost the greenization of the power generation. Do we have the will in China? Yes, we do. Many of the heavy industry companies, for example, state-owned steel makers and private steel makers are among the top-ranking green power purchasers in China, together with the high-tech companies like Alibaba. If you look at the third one, this table shows you the huge potential actually for industry sectors to be an demand-side flexibility provider for China's power system. Both like steel, aluminum, cement, and ferroalloys, they have these adjustable production load that could respond to the grids' power needs, which means they can reduce their load during peak hours and allow other sectors to be prioritized for electricity use. And this also helps themselves to be cut off from the power without notice. If we zoom into a specific sector, which is the steel sector, also the biggest emitter in China, you can see that probably we can say that China's steel sector has already peaked its output and emissions. Looking at the diagram on the left-hand side, the black part refers to China. You can see in 2020, it's like 1.1 billion tons crude steel output. And after that, for these past 5 years, it has been declining. This is a very natural declining, meaning that because it's far away from the government set goal about peaking steel output by 2030, which is good. And the other aspect for China to decarbonize its steel sector is also on the rising concern of embodied carbon in global traded goods, which leads to China's steel trade. Although China only exports about 10% of its crude steel production, EU is also among the top of export destinations of Chinese steel. But if you look at this tree map here, EU does not show because according to the China's National Bureau of Statistics, EU like export to EU is among 3 million tons, which is like eighth or ninth. The major destinations are Middle East countries and Southeast Asian countries where there are no emission trading systems yet, or effective carbon prices, or similar mechanisms like the EU CBAM. Nonetheless, China has already released a pathway for iron steel sector to decarbonize, with emphasis on energy efficiency and materials recycling in the near term, for example, before 2030, and with technology innovation and product upgrade in the long run from 2030 to 2050, and then at the end with CCUS as a last resort for the residual emissions. China's carbon emission trading system actually plays a good role here. In that last year, China has covered steel, cement, and aluminum in its emission systems, with the first 2 years as a trial period, meaning that no price burden will be there for these sectors, but just trial for carbon accounting and the verification of these allocations, free allowances. And right now, the material recycling rate for steel and aluminum and other like plastics are not that sufficient in China. So that's why China is trying to boost it with a newly established state-owned enterprise. Maybe some of you have already learned that China's steel sector has been testing out a hydrogen direct reduction for iron production. That means, steel sector will be an off-taker for renewable hydrogen in the future. But for now, where we are standing last year, if you look at the hydrogen flow on the left-hand side, coal gasification and coke manufacturing are still the major sources for China's hydrogen production, which means these are fossil fuel based. This leads to actually the potential for China's coal chemical sector to go deeper in decarbonization. For example, future ammonia and methanol production could easily be replaced with renewable hydrogen if we have the ramping up of renewable hydrogen in China. Do we have that? Yes, we do. This year, earlier this month, China's National Energy Administration has released this policy document to select some like national key projects in hydrogen production, transportation, and application. So on the map, I would like to show that the 2 pure hydrogen pipelines being constructed and expected to run in the next 2 years, which will transport sorry, my time is up, just 1 more minute. Will transport the Inner Mongolia renewable hydrogen into Hebei province, which is the biggest steelmaking province in China, and also like close to the coastal line in China, to link the hydrogen production and application. Hydrogen price is also the hurdle, like in the EU, that is stopping industries from using it. We face the same problem, but China is also doing a lot of policy work to help lower the price. That's what we do. At Agora, we try to bridge Europe and China on all those efforts to fight climate change. With this, I will end my presentation and encourage you to download the full slide deck and get to us if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Kevin, Joe, Michael, and Isa. And indeed, as I promised you, you will hear a lot of numbers. I have to say that I find this absolutely remarkable. There's a lot of light and quite some shade in the Chinese energy transition, and I think it's certainly worth taking a bit of a closer look. And that's what we want to do right now. And it's my pleasure to invite our guests, our commentators, who I'm asking to join me here at the panel. We have Ms. Kim Lackey from the German BINA. She's the Director for International Cooperation. Please join me here at the desk. Dr. Yu Hongyuan, Senior Research Fellow and Director of the Institute for Public Policy and Innovation Studies at Shanghai Institute for International Studies. Welcome. Oh, you're here. Sorry. And third, we have Dr. Miao Ren, who is the Secretary General of the Carbon Footprint Committee, the China Electronics Enterprise Association, also the CEO of the Chinese Institute for New Energy Systems. Welcome. Please, over there. And last but not least, Mrs. Camille Payard from the International Energy Association. She is an energy analyst on renewable integration and secure electricity. Welcome. I'm just wondering where I have to stand. I think over here. So let me start with kind of going back to the overall picture what we have seen. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Yu, if you look at the progress that China has made, and I think it's quite remarkable. I mean, what was it, from almost zero wind and solar to close to 20% within just 14 years? So I find this astonishing. If you think about this, if you look behind this, what is, in your view, what are the main drivers? How did that come about? How did China manage to drive this process? Is it policies? Is it technical innovation? What is behind these developments?
Okay, Secretary Chair. If I may, I hope I can use three concepts or three terms to answer your question. First is control. The second is investment. The third is culture. The control means China is a strong environmental state. China have a very strong willingness to control the pollution, control the dissertation, and control climate change since the early 1990s. Not only the carbon emission reduction, but also we can find China's forestation rate rise from 12% to currently more than 25% in less than 1 decade. China also a very strong state from top down to control, have this capacity for developing country. We have the government capacity to launch or to fulfill with the Paris Agreement and UNFCCC. Second term is investment. Investment for the China was very strong, not only top down, but also bottom up correlation between the business, local government, and the capital. And we can find the investment rise or investment competition between or among different local governments just in China for net zero or for green development, for net zero industry park, for green development, even for green fuel. This is also it's a very strong rise for the different local governments for the green development. The third term is, and also we can fund the investment for the innovation, particularly for the steel, cement, petrochemical, power sectors, which account for more than around 60%, more than 60% of China's carbon emissions. And also the last, but the most important is culture. Since the 2012, China have different development philosophies that the green development or to try to seek the balance between the human and the nature and the human, or between the environment and the ecological, economic development, and try to, this is culture, is try to find the need to find a new development model or new development stage. Just like China's CCP Party's Congress 2020, this new development model, new development philosophy, new development stage for green development. I think this we can use these three concepts like the culture, the control, and the investment to explain, answer the question. Thank you.
Thanks. If I make, you say it's control, investment, and culture. You have traveled a lot. If I may ask, I mean, if you think about the rest of the world, is this unique to China, or is there anything other countries can learn in this regard? If you say culture, control, and investment.
Just we actually, the future belongs to the global south, belongs to the currently the most developing countries. I traveled a lot from India, Bangladesh to unpacking to Ethiopia. I found that we should build a strong capacity for the government or for green development, for climate change governance. We need the capacity, state capacity, strong state just for climate change. This is the top priority. I think the high priority attached should enough importance to these developing countries, just like SDG, United Nations. So this is, we can find the difference from the common development, like green development. We have different model, but we should also build the commons from different states, different model. This green development, that strong state for investment, strong state for green development, strong state for control pollutions. So that for the different developed country, we should find difference from different countries, but we also should build the common model for different countries. This is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Miao, let's take a look into the future. Sorry, I'll stand over here.
Okay.
Your president, Dr. Xi, has kind of talked and promised a overarching target for all greenhouse gas emissions in 2035.
Yeah.
That has a lot to do with technology, but also methodology, measuring the emissions. If you think these 10 years ahead, what does China need in order to basically stay on track or to meet this target in terms of development, transparency, data development, technology?
Yes, I think the data transparency is a very important issue. And in the past time, it's difficult. I think it's not only for China, but also for other countries, especially for the developing countries, the data transparency is a very important issue. In future, to improve this problem, I think is from three aspects. First one is we need to refresh our methodologies. If we go back to think about our methodologies, for example, from the product level, from the enterprise level, or the organization level, and also for the some regional level, the methodology is separate and do not link each other. For example, one factories manufacture rural material, and it has auxiliary facilities. If we need to calculate the enterprise carbon emissions, then we have one methodology. And if we need to calculate the carbon footprint, then another methodology. And we have to go back to check the carbon index, not to calculate the total organization's emission and minus the auxiliary facility energy consumption and divided their production. Not use this way. Instead of we use go back to check the carbon emissions factors. Where the factors we can get from MIT database. But in future, what we need to do is link the three aspects: product aspect, and organization aspect, and regional aspect, methodology together, refresh it. This first one. Another one is about the duties. In the past time, when we do for example, an enterprise want to calculate their carbon footprint, they invite some organization to go to my enterprise and start with calculate our energy and calculate the energy balance table from this way. And after that, do a lot of, how to say, convey in the real place to do the calculation. And then after that, to do the certification. But in future, if we want to do this work better, then we divided the duties. Some people to provide the calculation software, and some people to investigate the methodologies, and some people based on this methodology to do the certification, divided. Like finance, like finance. So this the methodology. The second important thing is about the technology. And AI technology has developed too much. And we adopt this technology. For example, we used to apply some platform for cities. The cities use our software to regulation on both energy and water consumptions. We monitoring their electricity consumptions, and we also monitoring their water consumption at the same time. So we can compare. So based on this data cross validation, then easy to certificate their data. So this AI technology. And also the blockchain. Blockchain is very important for example, carbon footprint, and also for the organization carbon calculation. If one enterprise will say we are very green companies, we are take responsibility for the low carbon development, we are leading role, then to show yourself, show your contributions based on data. Then this means that all the data can be showed based on blockchain and the Internet of Things technologies. So this, and right now, what I want to say is, for example, carbon footprint methodology, do not consider too much about this technology improvement. The second thing I want to say is the international cooperation. And this is two aspects. One is standard, and another is about the data cooperate, data between different countries, how to share the data. So from the standard right now, for example, lithium battery, Japan, Korea, Europe, China, each country have their own standard. And one product, same, for example, manufactured in Indonesia, exports to different countries, they have to do 4 certifications and different. Why is this country to investigate in this standard as the same beginning, same structure? Because right now, no NGO and no industry has this kind of standard and suggestions. So in future, I suggest all NGOs focus, do some work in this field. That's all.
Have you talked to IEA about this? I mean, data scenario harmonization? That's something you're working on?
We do a lot of data-driven analysis.
Maybe good to connect here. Yeah. You're also working with blockchain technologies?
We did have a report on energy and AI this year, and we looked a bit into that.
Okay, that's great.
We can continue that discussion after the meeting today. But let me ask you, yeah, I mean, indeed, I mean, at the IEA, you're doing a lot of this kind of work, and you bring this international experience. You're not only you, but you and your colleagues working on, I don't know how many countries around the world. You have insights, you have experience. From your perspective, if you look at the developments in China, what is needed? What are the next steps? Because we have heard that we are starting to run into issues. For instance, on the distribution grid, fantastic growth of wind and solar, but now it's about flexibility, it's about the distribution grids. If you observe the Chinese situation, what comes to your mind? What would you recommend to the Chinese colleagues to what next steps to take?
Okay, thanks, Marcus, for the question. And I really first also congrats to Agora colleagues for this important piece of work that was presented just before. I think we all know that it can be quite tricky to navigate Chinese data. So I think this will become this annual report an important resource for all Chinese watchers and China watchers in general and beyond. And on your question on how to make variables, renewables an important part of the mix, I think the important questions is to look at how this installed capacity in China can actually be displacing coal when we look at the entire generation mix. So it's not just capacity, it should be turned into generation if it's efficiently integrated. So colleagues presented earlier the numbers for the installed capacity in 2024, but when we look at the latest 2025 data, actually it's quite even more incredible. Like just in May alone, for example, China installed the equivalent of the entire German solar fleet in solar PV fleet in 1 month. And we probably expect this year a bit of slowdown after the new policies on renewable energy generators pricing that were implemented earlier this year. But still at the IEA, we still think at least in the main case that by 2030, the installation will remain very strong. And by 2030, we'll see that the solar PV capacity will triple, so reach 3 terawatt of installed capacity, and wind capacity reaching 1 terawatt. So this is just simply incredible. And so in this context, I think there are really 3 important aspects to consider to kind of support this impressive development of clean electricity. So one is the need for hard infrastructure, so grid storage. The second is to increase the flexibility of the power system. And the third one is the need for further power market reforms. So just going briefly one by one, but on the needs for more grids and more storage, we actually published last month the latest World Energy Investment Report in the IEA, and we have calculated that by 2035, so in 10 years from now, the needs for grids and storage in China will increase by 200%, and they are already quite a high level if China wants to meet its climate pledge. So you know that in the past, China has put a lot of efforts and money in developing the transmission networks, and they will need to develop even more to increase interprovincial trading between provinces. But now what we see, and that is something that Michael mentioned also, we really see a growing need for more investment at the distribution grids level. And this is actually a topic that the IEA and Agora have been collaborating quite a bit this year. We have organized different workshops targeting Chinese audience on like distributed energy resources. The second aspect is on the need for more flexibility. So because of the need of the uptake of more variable renewables, of course, we'll need to develop more flexible resources, but also unlock the flexibility of the existing ones, like demand response, which is kind of under-tapped right now. Just to give a number, we made an analysis precisely on that last year at the IEA. When we look at China's short-term flexibility needs by 2030, so short-term meaning the hourly and daily ramping requirements, we see that these needs are set to triple by 2030 compared to a baseline in 2022. So in that space, of course, coal will remain an important resource to deliver flexibility. But what we see and what is interesting is that we think that most of the flexibility needed by 2030 can actually be delivered by low carbon resources in China, such as batteries, hydropower, demand response. And in that field, we don't think the problem is the technology like AI or blockchain that was mentioned before. In the field of flexibility, we think the main issue challenge is the need to improve the market framework and the regulatory framework to give the right signals and to incorporate these flexible resources in the market. And the last point that I mentioned is on that leads me to my last point on the need for further power market reforms. I think now it's pretty clear in China that the governments and grid companies have understood have recognized and understood the need to develop more the power markets to integrate more efficiently the renewable energies. And we've seen actually important reforms going in that direction earlier this year. So this is encouraging. For example, there was the reforms of the new contract for difference mechanism released earlier this year for renewable generators. And here, actually, the Chinese authorities, and we talk to them quite often, they are super interested in learning from experience from other countries. For example, it's funny to say, but the CFD mechanism that was just implemented in China, it started yesterday, I think. This is really inspired from the UK experience with CFD. So here, but it's also important to understand that China, as you also mentioned, it's building its own approach to power markets, as there's still an important state control and a lot of administrative measures that come on top of power markets. So this can come with barriers sometimes and preventing the efficient integrations of renewables. So overall, many positive advances, I would say, but still a long way to go in that direction.
Thanks a lot. There was so many things I would like, but one thing that just comes to mind, you say the Chinese coal plants are contributing a lot to flexibility. Maybe I'm wrong, but I remember at university I learned that coal plants are not very flexible. So what are the Chinese coal plants doing differently than European coal plants?
So actually, in that field, the Chinese government are pretty ambitious in terms of retrofitting the coal power plants. They have set objective during the 5-year planification to retrofit power plants. So it means like the old power plants undergo some retrofitting works to actually operate at a lower minimal load level, and they can ramp faster. So this requires some renovation works, but also in general in China, the new coal plants that are built now these days, because some coal plants are still being built, they are using new technologies, they are more modern and more flexible, so those do not need retrofits. But yeah, this is really part of the Chinese strategy, is to rely on coal retrofits and developing modern coal power plants to be flexible. And I think by the latest number I had in mind, but in 2023, China has already retrofitted 300 gigawatt of such coal power plants, which is also massive, but still not enough compared to the needs. That's why we also need other types of technologies, including clean, flexible resources to meet the needs.
Thank you. I think I need to refresh my knowledge about ramping rates of coal plants. 100 gigawatt of solar in 1 month in China is the equivalent of the German total amount of solar installed capacity. I'm German. I know that in Germany, people are talking about slowing down the growth of renewables. Isn't that a bit embarrassing? You're not talking for the government, but I ask.
Yeah, but it kind of is. Like, it really is. Nevertheless, I mean, like, we started at a different point, I think, and so it's now a different point in the debate, kind of, but it also comes down to a lot of, like, similar challenges, I think, because it's a lot about the grids, a lot about, like, especially the distribution grids, and then it comes down to prices as well. So we are having a discussion in Germany on, like, the power prices are just too high, especially for the energy-intensive industry. So it's a complex discussion, I think, but nevertheless, like, it is embarrassing to see. Just like,
yeah, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but just for everyone, if you think about costs and renewables, I would recommend a study of other colleagues who basically show that continuing the growth of renewables in Europe will actually reduce costs of power. So just look at our website and download the report. I wanted to ask you a different question, Mrs. Lackheit. We heard a lot about industry. In Germany, Europe in general, but also specifically in Germany, we have a lot of discussions about green steel, decarbonizing industrial facilities, etc., etc. Are we still kind of a bit advanced? Is that something that Chinese colleagues can learn from us? Or is it the other way around, that we can already look to China and to see, hey, what are you doing in China with regards to green steel, decarbonizing your chemicals, etc.? Where do we stand with that?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to answer, because I think, like, in some parts we're a little more advanced and in some parts China is. But when I'm looking into, like, okay, how big are the demonstration projects, China is way more advanced in some parts, because it's just like starting. But when we're looking into, like, what hydrogen is being used, for example, then it's like fossil-based hydrogen in a lot of cases in China, as far as I understood. And in Germany, we're looking into, okay, once we are using hydrogen, let's do it renewable. So that's like kind of like a different approach. Nevertheless, I think in a lot of cases in the decarbonization of industry, it's similar challenges now, because we're coming into, like, okay, we have a lot of, like, electricity, renewable electricity in the power sector now, and now it comes to, like, the harder bits and pieces. For the last years in Germany, we had quite some progress, I think, like, with just a really good working European trading, like emission trading system, and like a lot of effort was put into like energy efficiency, so that the companies are using less energy in general, so the energy prices are not that a burden for them. And I think we made some really good experiences with that, and also like the first steps on like demand response and like, okay, how to not have these like super high peaks in the electricity demand and like cutting them off. But it's not like that we have the answers to all of these things, because in a lot of these processes we are also just like starting and doing the first tests. And I think it's kind of similar in China, like testing things and how are they working. When I'm looking into now like the hydrogen things that, I think for the people online, it's not in the room anymore, but we still see the slide on hydrogen. So I was looking into theirs, like, okay, building out the first parts of the infrastructure to have security of supply for the ones that want to use hydrogen. You just like need to have the infrastructure in place. And that's something where it's also like a similar state in Germany, that the first ones are under construction, the first ones are like being put into operations now, but it's just like small parts, and then we will need to build out the rest of the system in the coming years. So there are like a lot of similar things where we can learn a lot from each other in the next years, I think. When I'm especially looking on hydrogen, because it's something that I was working on like the last 4 years before I started this job in a lot. What we've learned in Germany is if you want the industry to use it, they need to have a market for the products that are now being like green products. So it was kind of hard, like there were a lot of companies and people that want to build hydrogen production, and there were a lot of companies that were willing to use hydrogen, but then it came down to, okay, the prices are kind of high, we can't use these hydrogen products because we can't take the price and like put it on our products, because nobody wants these like new green products. So it's something, especially when I was looking at like the export numbers of Chinese steel, for example, where it's something we can also like maybe work more together to see like, okay, who wants a market for green steel, for example, or other green products, green chemicals, or something where we need to have a discussion as well, and with something that we will see in Germany in the next months, I guess. This also comes kind of down to what you were talking about, like the reporting, the standards, and it's like, okay, what is green hydrogen? How we are do the definition? Who is like doing the proof of that the green? Like when somebody says I'm producing green hydrogen, is it like true? It's like, doesn't somebody need to go there and like do a checklist? And how we at Dana were building up a system basically on blockchain to do the first certification on hydrogen to really see and like test out how this is working. So when it comes to like where there are a lot of things to work together on, and when it comes to like learn, it's like create the markets first before you put too much effort in ramping up the production, I think. Something that is like a learning from the last years. Nevertheless, with like supporting the production, I think we made some good experiences with this carbon contracts of difference, as you were already mentioning, like for the renewable production, but also for the like offtake and industry side, is like supporting them in having these like higher energy prices in some cases for the recent years, and then when the market is ramping up and it's getting more used to these kind of products, then maybe also like paying back something of the ones where you're now like profiting from using green energy.
Thanks a lot. I saw both of you nodding quite a lot while you were talking about markets. May I just ask to Dr. Yu and Dr. Miao, what's your perspective on this? Lead markets for green steel, is that also a concept that you would prefer for China on the global scale?
So, when we maybe answer questions, we should try to answer another question, that we should make the structural reform for global system. As we know, we're currently in a change all the just maybe 100 years change or transition for global system, not only from trade, environment, finance, particularly after withdrawal of United States from the Paris Agreement. So that's when we talk about demands revolution, market, but we should redefine the global market for green products. That means we should build the, just like President Lula from Brazil, from this COP30, and the South Africa's president hope we should build maybe the zero tariff for green products, for hydrogen, for green fuels, for the make the green maybe make a green trade, green products trade for the can be free flow from different country to country, just like 1990s, the free trade of as you know, the IT revolution at that time just pushed or encouraged by the global free trade based on WTO. So we need a green WTO for the zero tariff for hydrogen, green steel, green rare earths, just green steel, green rare, green cement for all over the world. Then we should make the structure as the first step. Then we can create a demand revolution from the south to north, from the Euro market, and create the buildings and buildings investment to the green products. And we should make a leader. China should lead a global fight for the fossil fuel, just we need between the green products and the fossil fuel products in the next maybe for before 2050 we finish the net zero goals for the globally. Thank you.
So a green WTO as basically the answer to the European CBAM. Is that it?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Okay.
Follow with this Professor Yu, and he just show his idea about the macro level and the totally pattern. And maybe I will focus on the energy aspect. And I think the most important thing is about the market reform, mechanism improvement. On two aspects. One is about energy. Another is about the ecological value. For the energy market reform, right now China is in progress. And I used to remember to draft the gas and oil reform. And about 10 years ago, I read a lot of documents and laws for EU. For example, and I know EU starts the reform beginning to 1980s. And after 20 years reform progress, you realize the oil and gas system market reform. And China have followed and studied your experience. And also for the gas electricity reform, we are in progress. And we also study a lot of lessons from United States and Europe. So right now we are in the progress of refreshing our energy market progress. But for the ecological way, right now some discussion, for example, how to realize the ecological value based on ETS system, based on the carbon market or the carbon tax, right now on discussion. And for the heavy industries, we have a trade system for carbon. But for the, for example, some electronic device, this kind of products, how to realize the ecological value. So in this condition, I think some people have a strong willingness to buy a zero carbon iPhone, have a zero carbon Rolex watch. In the past time, a very big car stands for I have money. But in future, I have a zero carbon lowest weight bag. Then shows I have money and I have the duty for my responsibility for green development. So how to show the green value mechanism, I think is important. Because energy and ecological value add together, then Chinese investors, Chinese companies will decide their energy themselves. Because from the microeconomic level, the investment methodology is same.
Japan, United States, Europe countries, all the project level IRR calculation, same. The difference is the boundary conditions. Then they make the boundary conditions methodology same. In this condition, we need international institute, IEA, OPEC, and Agora study, work together. This one. Another one is you focus on the country level. This country level is an idea about the geography view. Another way is just other exercise about the industry chain. From the industry chain aspect, the countries connected each other very tightly. For example, this time I talked to some China's PV, solar PV enterprise. They want investment in Europe, in United States, and they are strong willingness to show their zero carbon products. Then they are the driving force, they have their driving force use international standard to calculate their carbon footprint. Then they will themselves have the driving force to, for example, adopt clean energy and show their data transparency, something like that. So I think another aspect is tight industry cooperation.
Cooperation and making green products status symbol.
Yes.
Yes, please. One sentence. Just like 1950s, 50s, just after World War II, that the world have the mature plan to have the global infrastructure rebuilding the world for peace and development. But currently we need the new mature plan that maybe buildings, in trillions and trillions money for the global south developing countries infrastructure. I have been to the Madagascar and other countries. The main resource, the main exporter from for EV raw materials, but there zero EV in these countries because no zero infrastructure, zero EV charger in these countries. So we should have launch the maybe trillions investment in these developing countries to create a demand revolution. Then we can make our green revolutions as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to bring in some questions from guests from the audience. Please don't hesitate to continue asking questions. I cannot promise to read every single one, but let me pick the first one here because I find this fits quite well with the discussion we just had. So Mr. Anonymous says that there's a lot about trade, and there seems to be an agreement here on trade is helpful, green trade, even a green WTO. On the other hand, Dr. Yu, you said that one of the drivers of the success of the Chinese energy transition so far was control. Isn't that a contradiction? Is the question from the audience.
Oh, thanks for your questions. That's for control. It's just like the basic governance, also the state capacity that we just to try to, if we try to study currently the developing countries environmental governance experience, we found that quite a lot we can find the experience that we need a strong state, the strong governance or good governance, not a field state or fragile state cannot cope with any environment problem, pollution to climate change. But we should increase build the capacity like the modern state, like in Africa, from Africa to Southeast Asian countries, like Algeria, like Madagascar. This is Chinese experience. We have the strong governance to domestic environmental pollution control, from the water, air pollution to reforestation in such a short time, even
for a short time to get the net zero before 2060. But this also from the supply side. If you want to build the strong industry, green industry or green in the urbanization in developing countries from the modern pre-industry to industrialization or urbanization to the green state, you just a strong state is maybe the top priority for the green state or environmental state building. Secondly, we also to find that China actually should cope with his overcapacity and the green free trade or something like that. But we should maybe we should try to cope. Just we should focus only on the green part or climate change supply chain, not all the supply chain, only supply chain for climate change, for net zero, for net zero before 2050, like the green rare earth, green cement, the green steel. For this such kind of the green climate change supply chains, we should build such kind of use the free trade or free green trade to build a cope with this. To instead, because we really have quite a lot of difference or even the competition or the conflict for the trade for the manufactured goods or services goods, but for the common goods our human our earth our human, we should build a global supply chain for climate change for net zero. This is the urgent things, like the UN Secretary General Guterres said. This is humankind's urgent, most urgent things to do to build a climate supply chain. Use the free trade, just like 1990s, free trade for IT products. This created the revolution. We should build the green WTO green trade. That's for the climate change side products like China, EU, China, Germany. We can make the green parts of these products, manufacturing steel, green steel, as the first step for our mutual investment, our mutual trade. This for the human collectivity action is different from the bilateral trade conflicts or bilateral investment, the competition, something that we should pay more attention, attach more attention to the human common goods to avoid or to prevent our human collective action failure. This is my opinion. Thanks so much. Thank you.
I really like your passion. That's so great. Someone so passionate about like a climate supply chain. Just like maybe one sentence from my side to the question, because I think when it comes to trade, it's a lot about like having reliable and like trustworthy relationships. So strong state is not like a disadvantage at all. It could be or can be a really advantage because you know what you're working with. When it's like a really reliable strong state, then it can be something that is like promoting trade even more. When there are like parts in there where you can't really trust each other, or where it comes to like unfair conditions because like one side is like treating enterprises, companies differently than others or something, then it might be something that is like breaking the trust. So I think it's not like black or white that there's a like control or a strong trade is like against the trade. It really depends on like the individual relations.
Thank you. Let me take one other question. This is a bit of a moving back to a topic that we discussed earlier, but this seems to be of quite some interest, and someone challenging you, Mrs. Peyer, on the issue of flexibility again. So allow me to go back now, leave the trade side, back to flexibility. The question is basically, so China is still building, what is it, 94, 93 gigawatt new coal currently, apparently to use it as a flexible resource to support an increasingly variable energy system. Now the question is, aren't there cheaper options? I mean, how about demand response, battery storage, maybe gas peakers? Why does China build almost 100 gigawatt coal as a flexible resource. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's a big question, and we are also wondering, does it make sense ourselves? Like, it's true that the argument that is advanced, at least at the highest level, is that this new coal will be operated just as a flexible asset, but I think that's not really true when we look at the operating hours of these coal plants. They have not been decreasing a lot over the past few years, so they are still very much used for providing base load. And an important thing also that was implemented last year is a coal capacity payments for coal plants. Basically now those kind of coal plants that are being built, but also the existing assets receive kind of a flat payments based on the energy they deliver. So and the capacity. So this is meant to be kind of a support mechanism in case the hours of operational hours of these coal plants are decreasing. But this kind of market of support mechanism, and this is something we've been repeating at the IEA also to the authorities, it's kind of poorly designed because it's actually providing direct subsidies to build even more coal plants in a context where they are still being used for base loads and not for flexibility. If such a capacity remuneration mechanism were to be implemented, we think that's a good idea, and some countries have made that, but then make it a bit more competitive, also make a storage and all the assets able to provide flexibility, able to benefit from this mechanism. So those kind of administrative mechanisms that are actually distorting the markets we think are sending the wrong signals. And that's only one reason why, for example, we're still also building coal plants, because now they don't have any incentives to stop operating, actually, and they actually receive on top of the long-term agreements prices they have negotiated with the grid companies, this kind of other subsidies. So I think that's also the importance of what I was mentioning of improving and advancing further the market reforms. It's also to send the right signals to all assets that are able to provide the service that a power system with more variable renewables needs. And right now, this is maybe not the case. And I wanted also to add something about the state control and to complement on this, but more from the power markets state of view. In the past, we've seen that, yeah, China has been quite reluctant in letting power markets play the role. But now in a system with a lot of renewable energy, that's what we see, that the Chinese authorities and grid companies are starting to reevaluate and give a bit more space to letting the power markets operate, because they see that it's maybe the most cost-efficient solution for efficiently dispatching and dispatching the resources across the country. And here we should not forget that the three priorities of the Chinese government are affordability. So that's why we need a cost-efficient transition, but also energy security and emission reduction. So the good news is that renewable energies in that phase can help pursue the three objectives, and not only coal. And I think, sending the right signal through power markets could be a way to achieve these different priorities.
And just to add one sentence, because we're running out of time, but please.
This year's China government issued the 136 government order that to fully or totally marketalize the renewables, PV or wind farms. That means the renewable products shows the same competitiveness as the traditional energy in China domestic market. Thank you.
So, according to my information, the investment in coal-fired plant is not the behavior of government; it's behavior by the market, some enterprise investment. But this time investment in future, this might be operation not good, and they may lose money maybe in future. especially when we finish or fulfill our mechanism for the ecological market. This is one. The second thing is about what I want to say is the flexibility. It's not a thing. It's for example, seasonal flexibility, and the second level flexibility is different thing. So China for batteries and demand side management and some plants is developing at the same time. And for example, the batteries cannot solve the problem about the seasonal flexibility problem. So in this condition, you can compare China's coal-fired plant to Europe gas plant at the same time. So you can see that it may be necessary for the electricity system. But in future, I believe these coal-fired plants, their operation hours, their performance is not very high. Then in the future, then the market will make the investors lose money. And
this is absolutely fascinating. I would love to go deeper. Maybe we can have another webinar on the question of flexibility of coal in China. Not now anymore, but because we are running out of time, I would like to close the session by asking you, all of you, one last question with asking for a short answer. Just imagine that you are one of the co-authors of the energy chapter in the next 5-year plan. Chinese 5-year plan. You have one topic that you can add. Which topic would you write into the next 5-year plan? Who would like to start?
Okay.
Please go.
Carbon footprint.
Carbon footprint.
I think I would look deeper into the connection to water and how climate change might affect the water stress and therefore solutions.
Climate water nexus.
Yes.
And the water footprint.
For the international cooperation for the coalition willingness for investment or infrastructure revolution for renewable energy. Thank you.
I think one important point would be the implementation at the local level. Many positive signs have been given by the national government, but now I think the next round of challenge for the coming decade at least would be really to focus at the local level and make sure like the positive side was that we've been seen recently in the reforms are actually implemented locally.
Thank you very much. I promised you, sorry, just moving to the camera. I promised you a lot of numbers and a lot of questions and many answers. I think at least I still have a lot of questions, but not for now anymore. We need to close for today. I would like to thank our 3 panelists. Just imagine a round of applause from our audience. And I would like to hand back to Professor Yu to basically close the session with a few final words.
Thank you all for staying with us through today's discussion on China's energy transition and climate status report. I want to begin my closing remark with a personal anecdote because I just traveled from Spain where I visited a reclaimed coal mine amid scorching weather. So that's why when I first arrived in Berlin, I feel such a relief. But then very soon I received a heat alert in Berlin. Europe again is engulfed in extreme heat. It's a very apparent phenomenon with Spain and France recently recording temperature well above 40 centigrade. This just underscores the climate crisis is real, urgent, and undeniable. Reflecting on my personal experience, I keep recalling a Chinese fable. 一个和尚挑水吃，2个和尚抬水吃，3个和尚没水吃 which means one monk carries water to drink. 2 monks carry water together, but when the number increased to 3, no one fetch water. What a pity. This is a cautionary Chinese tale about how cooperation breaks down as the numbers of stakeholders increase. From a climate perspective, it reminds us global challenges demand global collaboration. If major emitters each remain isolated, we end up with no water, no meaningful climate action and progress. That brings me to our third message. Major economies, especially the European Union, China, ASEAN, must significantly step up their climate ambitions and do so in unison. We are at a critical juncture, and without aligned efforts by the world's largest carbon-emitting economies, it would be hopeless to reach Paris Agreement goal. Looking ahead, I'm pleased to share with you that next year's report is scheduled to be launched in March, ideally during Berlin Energy Transition Dialogue.